And for our second hand, this is a hand that Ricky played at 5-10. And let's go ahead and flip through to the action. It's another blind versus blind. And the villain raises to 30. And Ricky, you want to go ahead and explain kind of your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I flat with the ace-3 of hearts, which I've talked about in numerous videos. Other people have, which I think is pretty standard flat call here. Villain in the hand is taggy. I don't know if I want to call him straightforward, but he's just like a solid taggy regular. I think he runs like 13-11 maybe. Steals whatever these guys steal blind versus blind. He doesn't c-bet that often, maybe around 60% or so. So the fact that he raises blind versus blind and then checks me on this board isn't really that surprising. Anyway, so he checks, and with ace high, I don't know, I decided to check back. This is one of those spots where, I mean, sometimes you can just sort of bet with impunity against some players because they're literally check folding every single time when they check this board. Other times that's not the case, and maybe you need to, if you're going to bet, you need to fire multiple barrels, etc., etc. I sort of felt like he was the type of guy who would give up often enough, which I guess even though I have like a little bit of showdown in ace high, I should probably just bet anyways. But so he checks and I check back, and we can just go through to action on the river now because the entire hand is going to get checked down because I'm too afraid apparently to bet or something like that. But anyway, so river goes check check, we get to showdown. Thankfully, I sucked out the chop on him, and he shows up with the ace-5 of diamonds. So again, going back to what we were speaking about earlier. It doesn't surprise me, like I said, that he didn't c-bet this flop because of the fact that he just doesn't continuation bet very often. So he's more likely to actually have a hand when he bets the flop. But like, what comes to your mind when you look at a hand like ace-5 of diamonds on queen 8-4 rainbow, given the situation?
I mean, what will come to my mind certainly now will be, the backdoor equity that you're going to have, and this is probably the bottom of a c-betting range, really.
Well. Maybe of like a c-betting range on this board, it's not like near the absolute top. But like once you get rid of any value hands that he might have, it's really like not that bad of a hand to miss this flop with equity-wise. I mean, against like a one-pair calling range, you're going to have 20% and plenty of opportunities to fire second bullets to get people off of medium strength hands or like pocket sevens, ace highs, etc., etc.
Sure.
And in terms of hands that miss the flop, 20% isn't all that bad. That's like the equivalent of 2 overcards, like we went through earlier.
Sure, and something like obviously Ace King is the only example of that.
Yeah, so all I'm trying to drive home, I guess, is that you're not going to miss the flop much better than ace-5 of diamonds on this board. I mean, obviously it would be awesome if you had the 10 jack of clubs or something like that. I mean, that would be ideal, but those hands don't come around that often. So, I mean, again, he doesn't c-bet that often, so it doesn't surprise me, or maybe he thinks that I'm just going to play back and I'm way too often on this board, so he's just like, I just have to give up on these dry boards out of position or something like that. Then I guess maybe checking makes sense. But no, in general, I'd say, again, with ace-5 of diamonds, this hand misses this board too well. You've got an overcard and a bunch of backdoor draws and good cards that you can fire on later streets. So by virtue of the equity that this has against a continuing range, I think it needs to be a c-bet on the flop.
Okay, I think that's definitely a fair point. And I mean, obviously you're going to let the turn cards also dictate kind of how you're going to be betting the turn as well, right?
Yeah, the card sort of like in the hand that we just showed with your pocket fours. I mean, the cards that come off in the turn will sort of influence, when he decides to double or triple barrel, which is true. But I mean, you can use just what the text, the flop texture is to decide when you need to be c-betting. And I think continuation bet, ace-5 of diamonds, maybe check fold or check, try and get to showdown, give up, whatever, with pocket deuces or the king 6 of hearts or something like that on this board.
Okay, I think that's a really interesting hand.
Awesome. Anyways, the final hand that we've got for you guys is one that was sent to us by CardRunners, remember. It's at 2-4. It's rush poker, so a little bit different, not just because it's rush, but because effective stacks could potentially be very deep because heroes, 200 big blinds, as are many of the other players at a rush table.
Also, it's generally just everybody's, like, people are playing generally nittier stats also.
Yeah, a little bit more straightforward, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you want to get us to the flop, I guess. So in this example, hero opens ace-queen offsuit under the gun. He gets called by under the gun +1 and the button. Now, the button is like a taggy regular, and under the gun +1 is also a taggy regular, and hero told us at the time that he viewed them both as being pretty nitty. which obviously might impact his decision making a little bit, right? I know if I'm playing rush and I raise under the gun and get called by under the gun +1, and I think the guy's really tight, that I'm a little bit scared.
Yeah, I mean, it's he's got the top of his range there as he's probably ever 3-betting. So
yeah, right. Like if you wanna try and bluff somebody in rush, flat their under the gun raise when you're in earlier middle position, you're going to get a lot of respect there, right?
Yep, very true.
Anyways, so the question that Hero had for us was: is this a spot where you might want to consider checking as a pre-flop raiser? And we talked about this a little bit. In the previous segment, where there would be examples where maybe you have pocket jacks on ace, king, deuce, and you check because people will never call a bet. They'll call all better hands and fold all worse hands on that flop if you c-bet. But it might be a spot where if you check the flop, they will bluff once and give up with a hand they never would have put another dollar in the pot against you with. Or maybe they'll never bluff when check to and you can comfortably check fold, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think this is necessarily the case, though. So ignoring the fact that, we might be a little bit worried about, under the gun 1 having aces or something, which wouldn't be the end of the world because it's not like you're going to get stacked if he has aces here because given, we already mentioned that it looks insanely strong when he flats in the first place.
Sure, and I mean, not really, and really if he raises this, he can't really raise the flop. I guess he can, but I mean, it's just he's repping such a...
given what we're saying, it would probably be really good for him to raise any single hand other than good ones that he gets to this flop with because we're talking about how happy against this player that we would be to just fold ace-queen.
Yeah, as a general rule, though, guys at rush are not in a hurry to raise hands like that when they flat, especially this deep.
Yeah, a lot of guys playing really tight and passive aren't going to be using their image, as effectively as you might think they would. So you can just expect them to play kind of straightforward on this board.
Absolutely.
But okay, so that aside, he wants to know if this is a spot where you should check as a pre-flop raiser. And obviously there are times where the answer might be yes, and we talked about this in the previous segment as well. So say, for example, which I kind of already touched on this, but let's say you've got let's say under the gun +1 is actually a massive fish. And you check this flop, and now he bets with 7 high for no apparent reason. Or you check this flop, and because you checked, you now have ace-king, he immediately wants to call you down with pocket 6s on this board, right?
Absolutely.
I don't think Taggy or Nitty, well, we won't call him Nitty. That's just what Hero said he felt the players were at the time. We won't say that Taggy regulars are going to do that very often, though. Just because you check this flop doesn't mean they're going to start bluffing like crazy or calling you down with absolutely nothing, right?
Yeah, I'd say as a general rule, it's not happening.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier to me one of the problems that can come up by checking.
Yeah, I mean, it's the real thing that dawned on, or that kind of concerns me when you're considering checking here is that you're really giving up some form of, as far as I guess the best way to say it is protection, because really seemingly blank turn cards can smash these taggy or regulars ranges and just kind of give them the nuts. Whereas say a six of diamonds or even a 6 of hearts, for example, might end up making see me wins a set of 6s, and you might end up losing a monstrous pot. Whereas previously he wasn't going to put in any more money unless he did hit that 6. So you kind of give up. You would have won a very small pot, by betting the flop, or you lose a monster by checking it.
Yeah, you give him a chance to make a very strong hand in a situation where he was just never ever going to put money in without making that strong hand against you, either as a bluff or for value. So I definitely agree with that. It's a small consideration, but I think it's actually relatively important in a spot like this. The other thing that I'll say is that the majority of the hands that will peel your c-bet on this board, whether they are medium strength made hands or floats, and by floats, I don't think people float 7, 8 high on this board. I think most of the hands that will float you would be a hand like if See Me Wins had King Jack suited or Ace Jack suited, I think those hands would call 10 Jack suited, of course. Or a hand like Ace King would peel this board. Those would be the hands that would float you.
Sure.
And if you were to check this board, those might be the only conceivable hands that people would bluff with or bet with when checked to as well, and it'd be some type of overcard / gut shot hand or open and straight draw hand. But those hands will call a bet as well. So when you check the flop to people, you give them a chance to either realize some sort of equity on the turn against you, or you let them take free cards on the turn, where we've already established that these guys aren't going to be crazy when it comes to bluffing or barreling without hands. So you give them a chance to maybe, let's say they stab with ace-king, they give up on the turn, now they get to hit their 7-outer, I guess it's like a 7-outer, now they get to realize that equity for free, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It's also something where, given the action, if you check this flop and you play later streets against somebody, your hand looks a lot stronger when you check call than it does when you c-bet on this board. Or at least it can be perceived as stronger, especially if you spring to life on a later street. So if you bet this board, people would, peel the pocket jacks, 10 jack suited, queen jack suited, et cetera, hands, the ace kings, because of course they'd expect you to c-bet your air on this board a decent amount of the time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that as far as like representing what range you want to be representing, like it's tough to merge a range where like you check 3 ways and then come to life on the turn as like a bluff.
Yeah, it would probably be a cool spot to bluff because you might get a ton of respect. But
yeah, absolutely.
But anyways, so it's a spot where, and I sort of lost my train of thought, when you check with ace queen and spring to life on later streets, you might end up getting a lot of respect, or it'll kind of actually look like a hand, and people might be less likely to call you down light. But if you bet this board, people can justify calling based on the fact that you might be c-betting a lot of weaker hands. And then depending on which card comes off on the turn, you can then use that card to decide when you want to represent a bluff or when you want to represent some type of a hand that is just giving up. So for example, more draws turn, now you bet wider for value, expecting people to call you down. Or maybe bricks come off, and now you check, trying to represent some hand that's giving up. And then people might stab at the pot with their ace-jack or something, trying to get you to fold pocket eights or some type of example like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's the last hand we have for the video. And I just want to go ahead and thank you guys for watching, and it was a pleasure making it. And we got 3 more parts coming up, so stay tuned.
Later, guys.
Later.